few things I want to cover in the talk tonight, but I thought I'd start and kind of use as a theme. I am, along with about 7 or 8 others of us in the Sangha, taking off next Wednesday for a trip to Korea. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about that. Every 3 years in our international school, the Quantum School of Zen, we have a trip somewhere in the world. The Quantum School of Zen, which is a school that we're part of, was started by Zen Master Bon Soeng. That's his picture on the wall over there. He came to the United States in 1972 after spending, I don't know, about 8 years or so in Japan, in temples in Japan, working with the Korean population in Japan. And before that, he was a teacher and a monk in Korea and had a temple in Seoul called Hwagesa. So, as a lineage, we are connected to the Korean lineage, although we've become a bit of a side. We're not exactly on the Korean line anymore. We're our own school, but our origins come from Korean Zen and Korean Buddhism. Many people who know about Zen really know it through Japanese Zen. Zen is actually a Japanese word. In Korea, the word is Sun. We write it S-O-E-N. In China, it's Chan. In Vietnam, it's something else that I can't remember right now. In America, we call it Zen, but that's a Japanese word, and it literally translates as meditation. So, if you say we're Zen Buddhists, we're meditation Buddhists. People, when they think of Japan, the temples in Japan tend to be Zen temples, and meditation is the heart of what's called Zen in Japan. In Korea, Buddhism is a little bit more complicated. In Korea, there is a Korean temple, which is a Buddhist temple, and it has many, many things going on. Zen meditation is really just one part of it. And in the Korean temples that I've been at, most of them have a Zen room. Of course, they'd use the Korean, so it would be sun, and I don't know what the word would be for room. But where I have some pictures, but I didn't bring them out. I have some pictures of Hwagesa, and it's interesting. I'll show you all if you're interested. But the buildings in a temple in Korea are quite ornate. They're painted in greens and reds, and there's the eaves where the supports for the roof come out. They're all dragons coming out of them, and they're quite, to me, being there, the buildings themselves feel quite alive. But when you go to the Zen hall, the room is a little more, if you leave out the altar, the room is a little bit more like this room. It's basically white. There's sitting spaces, and most of the ones that I've seen have yellow floors, and it's yellow. I think it's a kind of linoleum or maybe even oil paper, because the floors are heated with, now it's probably hot water. It used to be in the old days just the heat from the fires, and the heat comes up from the floor. And the rooms are very bare bones and not ornate at all. So when a monk decides to be training in meditation in Sun, they leave all the ornate structures behind, and it becomes very simple and very plain in a way. But on one of the trips I've been on in Korea, we got a tour of the head temple, which is called Chogyesa, which is also in Seoul. And the tour guide said that in Korea, Buddhism is actually a combination of 4 different things. It's a combination of Buddhism, obviously, also Taoism, also Confucianism, and also shamanism. And those four strands are woven together into what they call Buddhism in Korea. So if you get, I don't know how to put this, but practice in our style of Zen is centered on meditation as the training, but there are actually many other paths that can be used for the same purpose. And the purpose, we say, is to understand your nature and to help this world. So that's the point of practice. Practice is a tool and a means to manifest that in our lives. So in Buddhism, and especially in Zen, there's also the importance of lineage. So we have Zen Master Bon Soeng on that wall, and then on the back wall, if you've looked behind you and you've been here, you'll notice that there are three other Korean Zen teachers. All of them are in our lineage. So the man on my left was Zen Master Bon Soeng's teacher, that's Kwan. Then on the right of those three pictures is Zen Master Mangang, who was Kwan's teacher. And then the one in the middle is Zen Master Kyung Ho. And Kyung Ho lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s perhaps. And he is credited in Korea as revitalizing the Zen line. And in my readings, I'm not a historian of Buddhism in any way, but my readings have found that in many, many, many Buddhist countries in the later 1800s, there was some kind of reformation that happened in Buddhism. And one thing I read, and I don't know the truth of this actually, but one thing I read talked about how the interaction of Buddhism and Christianity started to happen. And Buddhism, in a way, in all these different countries, they felt that there was a need to revitalize and kind of become more modern. And one thing I read in the other kind of Buddhism that's very prevalent in the United States now is called Vipassana Buddhism. And I have read that that actually was started sometime in the early 1900s, again, as a way to simplify and to make Buddhism more available to the common people. Because up until then, Buddhism was something that the monks did up in the mountains, and they didn't have much connection to the people. The Christians started coming to Asia, and they went right to the cities, and they interacted with the people. So there's been a movement ever since, really the later 1800s, to bring Buddhism back into the city, back into the people's lives, and to become relevant for people's everyday life. And actually, we're having a 2-day conference while we're in Korea, and one of the panels is on how to make Zen relevant to young people. And this is really coming from our monastics in Korea, who are trying hard to find ways to connect with young people growing up now, because they lack some of the basic foundations of Buddhism, and their culture is changing so quickly that there's a lot of, it seems like people may be disconnected to the deeper root. And I think maybe many of us who are in our 50s and 60s, we remember that from our youth in the 60s and 50s. And that sense that the culture had shifted, we were a little, and nothing made a lot of sense. I don't know if it makes any more sense now, but we try. So for most everybody in this room, Korea doesn't mean that much. It's a place that talks I sometimes talk about, because I go there sometimes and our lineage comes from there. But in thinking about it, the importance to all of us who are practicing Zen now is there is a root that goes back through our teacher Zen Master Bon Soeng to Korea, which then traces back to China, and then back down to India to the time of the Buddha. And our teaching is not something that's been recently manufactured out of whole cloth. It's something that has been worked with and experienced for really a couple thousand years. And Buddhism has a knack, as it moves from country to country, to adapt the culture of that country and change based on where the time and place where it is. So of course, Zen and Buddhism is in a lot of that transition now. And personally for myself, perhaps because I had the personal contact with Zen Master Bon Soeng, I find that the connection back to Asia helps ground the practice. And I know I've had this experience before, traveling around in Korea and other countries in Asia. There is a kind of feeling of rootedness that I get in being there. So, I've talked about Zen Master Bon Soeng a number of times. I want to speak just a little bit about him today. I think when I was thinking about stories of him before this talk, the one that actually occurred to me, it's not a funny story in any way, but to me, it represents the power and the energy that Zen Master Bon Soeng had. He was always interested in the world. He was very involved with the reunification of Korea. There are letters that I've seen that he wrote to the president of Korea at the time. This was back in the 80s. He had involvement with some of the higher-ups in the government and the culture in Korea. And at one point, he decided that he wanted to go speak to Gorbachev. And he did. He did. There's a picture of him. I mean, he probably didn't get too much time with him, but he got to go to the Soviet Union at the time, to a meeting where religious figures were, and he had his time with Gorbachev. He had that kind of ability to manifest things. Things that to me seem so, I mean, like in this country, it's so big. You know, to be someone who gets to meet the leader of the country, it takes something, and he had that. He decided at one time, he thought he wanted to get the Pope involved. This was again in the 80s, I don't remember who the Pope was then. But he decided that all the religious leaders in the world needed to take a hot tub together. And that if they just got in the hot tub together, that a lot of things would be worked out. And as bizarre as it is, I think he really believed it, because he had a view that the problems, he used to say, human beings, number one bad animal. He said, all the other animals on this planet would be a lot better off without us. And he had that view. But it wasn't that human beings themselves are bad. It's just that we lose our way. We fall into ignorance. Buddhism doesn't hold original sin. So we're not all already broken. Does that make sense? That in Zen and in Buddhist teaching, we're actually all complete. We all already have it. But we lose our way through our ignorance. And our ignorance grows out of our desire. That's basic Buddhism 101. And out of that desire, and I would add fear, grows all of these adaptations and mental formations and defenses, and essentially we build a structure of a self that we get encapsulated behind. And then when we see ourselves or we see others, we think the self that we're looking at is the true self. But Buddhism teaches us to turn the gaze back inward, go behind the facade, and look at what is it that's driving the facade. Who's actually, in Zen we sometimes have this idea of host and guest. Who's the host and who's the guest? So, just thinking of our own selves, what's the host? What is the essential quality of our humanness? And if you look at your life, it's pretty obvious the ways that we divert and protect and create in order, probably thinking that we're protecting this precious jewel, but I think ultimately we end up suffocating the precious jewel. And that our practice, again, is oriented towards waking up, opening the doors, and allowing the precious jewel to be revealed, and then we can share it with the world. So, 2 weekends ago, I think that's what it was, we had a 3-day meditation retreat, and we ended the meditation retreat with a precept ceremony. And 2 people here, Jason and Marshall, became what we call Bodhisattva teachers. And in thinking about this talk, all of the things that Zen Master Bon Soeng did were his skillful means. Once in a while it wasn't so skillful, but that's we're all human. But what he basically was a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is someone, traditionally it says, a bodhisattva is someone who's already attained enlightenment. And in the Indian tradition, once you attained enlightenment, you're done. So it's like if you attain enlightenment in this lifetime, when you die, you're finished. You basically join again with the oneness of the universe, and you're done. And in cultures that believe in reincarnation, the whole point of liberation is to get off the wheel of reincarnation. Again, with the sense in Buddhism, the first noble truth is about life is suffering. So if you're trying to escape this suffering or get out of suffering, you attain your true nature and you're done. But in Chinese Buddhism, actually later Indian Buddhism and Chinese Buddhism, and the kind of Buddhism that practice in Korea and in the Zen world here, it has the Bodhisattva vow. And the Bodhisattva vow is that I will wait to finish until everybody else is ready. And then all of us together will be done. So, a bodhisattva in the traditional sense would be someone who's finished their work, but after they die, they choose to return, to keep helping. So one day, Zen Master Bon Soeng came out in a ceremony, and he said, one of my students said, when you die, I'm going to follow you. Figuring that he dies, he'll go to a good place, and that's the place to go. And Zen Master Bon Soeng said, no, you don't want to follow me. Because after I die, I'm going straight to hell. Because that's where they need a Zen center. And that's the mind of a bodhisattva. And that's really the true manifestation of our practice. It's not for me. It's not so much, I'm going to have it better. Yeah, it's a nice byproduct. But we use that to help the world. So a bodhisattva in our tradition, a bodhisattva teacher, is someone, generally, or probably always, it's a layperson. It's a person who is embedded in our everyday life. Both Marshall and Jason have young children, they have wives, they have families, they have jobs, and they have their practice. So someone who's a bodhisattva teacher is integrally connected to their practice, and their practice in their life isn't that separate. You're just helping. You go from place to place, situation to situation, with the question, how can I add to this moment? What can I do to help? It's actually a simple thing to ask, but if we're honest, we know how hard it is to actually do that. To dedicate our lives often means we let go of our own gain in order to help, or not put our own welfare so much ahead of others that we lose sight of the suffering of the others around us. So, in a sense, you can say a bodhisattva is someone who's been practicing. And, we talk about this lower abdomen all the time. And I say in China and Korea, we call it a tanjan. This energy garden. For a bodhisattva, for any practitioner of Zen, your center lights up. We bring energy down. And Zen Master Bon Soeng, almost every time I'd see him, he'd be poking somebody right in that tanjan. And he'd say, make your center stronger, stronger, stronger. It's like, this place is the place of our groundedness. This is our place of stability. This is a place where we're not living so much in our likes and dislikes, our desire, our dreams, our hopes. We're just grounded in this moment. I'm here. And there's a clarity and a power and an energy that gets developed as we breathe in and our belly rises, and we breathe out and our belly falls. When Paul gives meditation instructions, he says it's not a breathing exercise. It's not. But slowly breathing in, slowly breathing out, bringing our attention. You all know it when you're meditating. Your mind's going left and right. This happened today. Why did that person do that? Oh shit, I did that? How could I have done that? And the shame and the humiliation just jumps up. Practices bring the energy down. That's all thinking. Generally speaking, it's not even true. It's just our story. And though we may not be able to stop the incessant chatter, we can bring our attention down. And with each breath, breathing in and breathing out, we light up our center. We light up this tanjan. There's energy. We become enlivened. If you look at people, we're constantly dissipating our energy. We're chasing after things. We're hoping that if we get something from somebody or something, then we'll be happy. And our energy is just scatterbrain going out. This kind of practice brings our energy down. Breathing in, what am I? Breathing out, don't know. And our center becomes stronger, stronger, stronger. And we get that stability to face the difficulties that inevitably will arise in front of us. So the center is lit up. The heart is lit up. I'm using 6 different words for the same thing. You all understand what I'm talking about. But also, the heart is open. It's not so defended. We're letting go of this for me, I have to have it. And as we chanted, hearing the cries of the world, our heart is open. It's not necessarily gooey and soft, but it's open and alive. And our mind is clear. We're not so trapped in that incessant chatter, me, I, mine. We have a wider view. The first of the Eightfold Path is right view. In some ways you can say right view is no view. Any view limits us, and we have blinders on like a horse running in a track. Right view means wide open. In some of the Zen literature it says, see one thing, understand 10 things. That our mind is focused, open, and and not limited by the self-centeredness of our own particular view. So the center is strong. Our power, we have so much power as humans that we don't even tap. But our center is strong, our stability is strong, our heart is open, our mind is wide and clear, and then connect. Do it. Be it. Completely inhabit the moment we're in and express ourselves with that intention of helping all beings. And that's what a bodhisattva is. And to me, as I look back at my experiences with Zen Master Bon Soeng, that's what he was a master at. Day in, day out, wherever he was, whatever he was doing, it was for all beings. And again, I don't mean to say he didn't take care of himself, but his orientation, okay, right now, how can I help? Right now, what does the situation need? So that the 20 people in this room will be awakened. That he was just constantly moving forward, trying to help all beings wake up. That's what a bodhisattva does. And each one of us has that exact potential. Each human being is unique. We find ourselves in our own karmic situations, but wherever we are and whatever we're doing, we can bring that energy to the moment. So, in my work life, I'm a psychotherapist. It's easy to keep that attitude and to have that intention. Some people here are builders. Some people here are gardeners. Some people here are in business. Some people here teach in schools. Everybody's got their own life path. It doesn't matter. Individually, for each one of us, of course it matters a lot. But in the wider view of humanity, it takes all kinds of people and with all kinds of proclivities to make up the fabric of human life. Wherever you find yourself, that's the place to express it. It's not like practice means I'll get better so I'll get a better job. That might happen, and that's great, so do it there. But wherever we are, whether it's dealing with the struggles of people who are homeless, dealing with the situation of doing a good job at finishing the construction project that I'm doing, or serving food to other people, or cooking food at home, or you get the point. Any activity you could imagine, you bring that strength of your center, that openness in the heart and clarity of mind, you bring those together and you're manifesting practice in your everyday life. That's really what a practitioner is. And again, just to close it out, that to me is what Zen Master Bon Soeng showed in his life. And that each one of us has the capacity to do that, whether we ever get ourselves into a meeting with Gorbachev or not. But whatever we're doing in this very moment, that's the time that we express it. And if we do that, not only is our life better, our own individual lives, but the society and the world we live in is improved. Improved isn't even the right word. Is healed. Moves towards what the possibilities could be. Question? Yeah, Karen.
You said two things tonight that it's the first time I've heard you say. One was introducing the chanting on Sayam Bosam, and you define a bodhisattva as one who is healing the world,
Yeah.
whatever. And you said not as a human being.
Not.
You said a bodhisattva
Yes,
is like
I just didn't hear the last two words you said.
a bodhisattva is like on another plane.
Oh, right.
And I was surprised because from all I know of Songsunim and reading The Compass of Zen and the way he lived his life, I've imagined him without meeting him to have been a bodhisattva.
Yeah.
And now I hear you saying that. So I'm just wondering, when you started out and said a bodhisattva is other than a human being, help me understand.
Well, yeah, I found myself stuck in what I was saying when I was introducing that tonight. That picture over there, and none of you probably know it, if you look up there, that's the image of Kwan Bon Soeng. That's not a human being. That's a deity. And it's a deity, it's complicated, and I don't even understand it all. It's not the same as God in the Western sense, but it is also not human. I don't know what to do with that. So sometimes I call it an archetype. But I think really and as an archetype, it's something that we bring down into our human existence and manifest. So the way that Bodhisattva is helpful for us, I think, is that we are it. It's not worshiping Kwan Bon Soeng up there, it's being Kwan Bon Soeng moment to moment in our lives. And that's what I was trying to express. Okay? David? Yeah.
Just have a question about, you mentioned your teacher many times, just curious how you met him or how that relationship formed.
Yeah. It wasn't, I wouldn't call it a real deeply personal relationship between the two of us, although when he would come to Berkeley, I would drive him around, and certainly we had something of a personal relationship. But I had been practicing Zen for about 4 years before I met him. I had sat with some other teachers, and I had started meditating even well before that when I was in college. And I was living at a small Zen community up in Mendocino, and some people from Empty Gate were friends with somebody who lived there, I guess. Somehow, yeah, that was it. And some people would come up to do solo retreats up there. And the last person that had come up to do a solo retreat had left a flyer for a 7-day meditation retreat with Zen Master Bon Soeng in Berkeley. It was June of 1979. And I was in a real low point in my life at that point. I was a mess emotionally, and I just didn't know what to do with myself. And I was driving in my truck trying to get some contact with some people to help me out, and I remembered about that retreat that was starting. So I turned my truck around and I called Empty Gate Zen Center and asked if there was a space. They said yes, so I drove to Berkeley and I moved into the Zen Center afterward. And I actually, the first time I met Zen Master Bon Soeng was in a hot tub. He really was a wild man. And it was 1979, so things were different then, I suppose. But at Empty Gate used to be over on Arch Street off of Hearst, near campus, and we had this big old redwood hot tub in the back. And the retreat started on Sunday, I believe. He didn't get there till Wednesday, and I guess we bowed to him, and I heard him say a few words, and then I was going to sleep, and there was a knock on my door. The woman who left the flyer, said that Zen Master Bon Soeng was in the hot tub, and come on down, and there were about 20 people in this hot tub, and he was pointing out stars, and we were just hanging out. And that was my kind of, well, this says more about me than him, but the places that I connected with him were a lot in the informal, like his teaching was very valuable to me. A lot of the teaching that you hear coming out of my mouth week after week really comes through him. His languaging, his understanding of it really spoke to me. But his manifesting it in small ways, informally, were the places that I felt the deepest learning and the deepest connection. Did you know him in New York?
I didn't, but I only met him once. When he showed up in New York, and I'm really familiar with other teachers in the East Coast where they talk about like you're making soup
Yeah.
at Brown. You know, and it's like, that's part of my like interest in him personally is that, you know, his way to connect with students was that he's making a big pot of soup and like involves them in making soup.
Right.
And then this conversation goes on in the kitchen where he's like actually teaching and making soup at the same time as he's feeding them. It is a bodhisattva action. Not only is he doing something, but he's involving people in this action.
Right.
And he's also feeding them, like, in many ways.
Yes. Yes. He had a room at the top of the stairs when he'd be at the Zen Center, and you could always just knock on his door, and he'd say, "Come in," and my image of him is sitting on his bed with his monk's pants and a white t-shirt, and he'd just say, "Yeah, come on, sit down." It was just that availability and that accessibility that was really lovely. Even though he was honored and respected and treated that way, he was also very down to earth, very connected to us. And it really, I think, for most of the teachers that you'll meet in the Quantum School of Zen, there's not a lot of I'm high and you're low. It's like we're all in this together. I've learned something, I have something I can offer to help, but we're all in this together. There's not a lot of big separation and we're not that much of a devotional school. Any other questions, comments? Did you want to say something?
You talked a lot about the center at the end of your talk, which reminded me of an article I read, which kind of spoke to me. So the article is on PBS. It's an interview with Richard Gere, who is a Buddhist. And he talked about how he started out with Zen, and he moved into Tibetan Buddhism, and he explained why. And his explanation was like this. He said that the version of Zen that he experienced was all about the center, the hara. I'm guessing it was Japanese Zen. And what he experienced was that he became very focused, very clear, but also very dry, because the heart, the emotional center, was not engaged. And according to him, when he moved to Tibetan Buddhism, they focused on the heart more than anything. So I'm also someone for whom the heart is probably the most important part. Maybe it's cultural, I don't know. And at times I do feel that Zen is a little bit kind of removed from that feeling, from that aliveness. I was just wondering if you could explore that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of stereotypically true, but I think you're here almost every Wednesday. You hear Dharma talk after Dharma talk after Dharma talk. I don't think it's really fair to say that the heart isn't included in our Zen practice and our Zen teaching. I think you'd be really leaving a lot out that we talk about. I think, again, stereotypically there may be some truth to that. I mean, Tibetan Buddhism, sometimes people call it the Roman Catholic part of Buddhism. It's very full of ritual, it's very full, and it's colorful. Especially Japanese Zen, it's black robes. The temples in Japan are beautiful, as I thought I was going to get there this year, I'm not quite. But they're not, but you go to Korea, and what I'm saying is it's alive with color and shape, and it's not this kind of cold, dry practice. Cold, dry practice is the shadow. And it happens, people fall into the shadow, but that's not the way. If your practice is cold and dry, you're missing something. When your center is strong, it provides the stability for the open heart and the clear mind. If your center's not strong and your heart is open, you can be so overwhelmed with the suffering. You need the stability to have clarity, to be able to have the wisdom to actually deal with the suffering. Okay. Anybody else?
So this cold, dry practice, or Richard Gere's experience with Zen. It's interesting if we sit here, we ask, who am I, right? And it's cold and dry if you get stuck with I am this, and it's all about yourself. And that's the common the common criticism of Zen is, you sit there and you look at your belly button, navel steroids, right? And it's narcissistic. That's the real common criticisms I've seen. But when you let go of the I, then the heart automatically opens up, because then you're not on yourself, you're available to everybody else. So it's interesting that that's a common criticism.
Yeah.
That's, I think, misdirected.
Although again, it's the shadow. It happens.
Yeah, right.
But that's attached.
It's everybody's problem.
Right.
So all the Tibetans that first start Tibetan Buddhism got the same problem. They're stuck on I.
You made two comparisons to Buddhism and Christianity tonight, which always interests me. So I had a question about your statement about original sin. Because, at least in my branch of Christianity, we don't think about it so much as like, everything was fine and then this happened and now everybody's like...
So we bit the apple and...
Yeah, exactly. Right?
After that.
I wrote about it in a paper, and this is not my language, but about being like, something is wrong, like there's something off, and we're trying to figure out what it is, And I was just wondering that, you said we all have it, we're all like, and the way I heard that is like we're all perfect, or we're all like
complete.
But like if we are all at the same time also focused on the I, isn't that in its own way like a version of original sin? Like I don't like that language anyway.
Yeah, in Buddhism we'd say that comes from ignorance, and you could almost equate the two, especially the way you're talking about it.
Because I feel like if we didn't all have this problem, then we wouldn't all be here.
Right.
So I just was having trouble like holding, we're all complete, but also we also have this problem together.
Apparently Suzuki Roshi said, you're talking to his students, he said, you're all perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. It's kind of both and. I realized this, I'm remembering now after, Sergey, you asked something last week, and I don't even remember your question exactly, but it's frustrating to try to say something, because as soon as, I'll just say my experience, I'll try to be talking about something, it's so easy to leave the other side out. And it's really a both and, or all of the above kind of thing. It's not this to the exclusion of that. So it's very easy, if you hear the phrase, let go of all desires and attain your true self, that could become very cold and dry, because I'm not connected to the world. So that phrase is a helpful phrase, because desire leads us to suffering. But it's not exactly get rid of everything and have nothing. I think when I first started practicing, I remember I was living at this place for about maybe it was only about a month, and we were painting the trim on the building. And people were asking, well, what color do you like? And I'm thinking, why would you ask me that? Why? It's not about likes and dislikes. But that's one-sided. That was an error, because you do have to paint the trim. And what are you doing, and why are you doing that? And so it may not be about desire, but there is beauty. There is culture. Without art, it would be a very dry world. But passion is not the same as desire. In a way, we each have our own passion, and we have to find a way to harness that and not get lost in the desire of it, but actually being able to manifest it and bring it out in the world. Again, I would say that's the Bodhisattva path. If your skill is to play the flute, then play it and make it beautiful. Or make it dissonant and opens people's minds. It doesn't have to be beautiful, it can be beautiful. Everybody has their own way, and we have to find that way and give it to everybody else. That's the Bodhisattva path. And the sitting, the chanting, the bowing, the questioning is all oriented towards allowing our natural, I was going to say birthright, I don't know if that's the right word, but that natural completeness to be expressed. Because we all hold back. We're so afraid. Life is so challenging. Now I know I'm a therapist, so I get difficult stories. But today, it was everywhere from a relative that has cancer to a young couple with 2 young children just trying to be able to find a way to be together and support themselves as a family. Everything's topsy-turvy and changing, and we're struggling so much to keep up. Sometimes this idea of life is suffering can be intellectual and an idea, but look at your life. Look at what you're really dealing with. If they're not dying now, they're going to be dying very soon. And if it's not them, it's us. And we get these wonderful periods where we're getting everything we want, and then something happens and the rug is pulled out from under us. That's human life. That's not our fault. That's not a mistake. But how do we live with it? How do we keep our balance? So that when the rug gets pulled out and we've fallen down, we have the power and the ability to stand back up and to express ourselves some more. That's practice. That's Zen Buddhism. That's what we do.